an opportunity with a clean room or a lab situation or maybe a nuclear reactor or someplace where it's not easy to get someone. It's expensive to have them in that space, and then it's also even more expensive and potentially dangerous to, in fact, have them working in that space. If they happen to contaminate the space, cleaning that up is a huge expense and whatnot too. So that's a big piece of it. And then also there's the materials. If somebody's working on learning a different process, if you don't have to actually waste all the materials in the process because they're doing it virtually, that's just another way that you can actually save cost there. And it also kind of dovetails into the final point that I have on this front, and that's around it being more efficient. So one of the really interesting things about virtual reality is that it's kind of like a transportation device. So it can transport you through space. So we can take you from this room right here to a lab environment in London, right? Or we could take you around the world to a manufacturing space in China. Or we can take you through time to actually see, one of the examples I have later is Walmart is using it right now. And one of the things they're doing is they're using it to train their associates on how to deal with Black Friday. And so they're actually transporting, you can't do that on, October 1st. You can only do it right after Thanksgiving, right? So they're transporting people through time. And it's a really efficient way to actually do that. Another thing about it that makes it efficient is that it's actually very standardized, right? I can make sure that you get the same training as you get, and that's super powerful as well, especially if there's a compliance piece to what it is that you're doing, because then you can actually measure. We can, in virtual reality, not only can you train somebody to do something and do these motions, we can actually measure whether or not they are doing the thing that we told them, that they needed to do. And at the end of the experience, if there are 10 different steps, we can say, okay, you did the first 8 correct. The last 2, you didn't do this one in the right amount of time, or you did this one out of order, or you took this piece of equipment over top of this piece of equipment and it was supposed to actually go over here. Things like that are pretty interesting ways that you can actually use it. So does that make sense? I'm about to move on to kind of talking about some specific examples. Do you have any questions before I do that? All right. So the first thing I want to talk about, which again, the Foundry and Foundry 45 is a nod to kind of our industrial experience and background. So I'm starting with this one, and that's actually what we're going to show here later on to give you guys an example of what's possible. So I won't talk too much about that because I've got a little short video I'm going to show. BP is actually using it for training workers on oil rigs and in dangerous environments. Which is, as I alluded to before, it's an amazing use for it because you can actually transport somebody to that place without actually putting them in harm's way. And that's just one of the examples. Also, of course, think about it's hard to just transport somebody and drop them down on the oil rig before they have some sort of training. There's a lot of ways of doing that right now with simulation and whatnot. This is just a level higher. So this is a maintenance video example. This is one that we have done, and this is actually the one that we've got in the back here that we're going to show you in just a sec.
VR training is a thing, and big brands like Walmart, UPS, and AT&T are getting on board. With VR training, you don't just read about a process or watch a video. You actually do the task. It's experimental learning, which is a more engaging, less expensive, and more efficient way to learn. It's pretty fun, too. Here you see a VR training experience that teaches users how to perform maintenance on a large pump. When the user dons the headset and picks up the controllers, they are transported to an industrial space where they learn how to work on the pump. It's an intuitive process, and there are step-by-step instructions to guide the user along the way. It's a fun and powerful way to learn.
That is awesome.
So that's one that we're actually, that one's the one that we're showing here today. So we will give you a chance to do that. There's a few fun pieces to that as well that I won't, I don't want to, some people have seen, 2 people in the room I know have actually seen it, but there might be a way to blow some stuff up that's kind of fun, so maybe you guys will want to have a chance to do that. Okay, so that's kind of, that's how people in the kind of industrial manufacturing space are actually using it. Interestingly, it's being used in retail training as well. Has anyone seen the KFC virtual training video? Please tell me.
It makes me want to puke.
It's really, it's amazing and scary, and I highly recommend that you dial it up on. The video for it is about 8 minutes long, and I just couldn't. I didn't want to skeeve the entire room out by showing it. But essentially, what they put together is it's an escape room, and in order to actually get out of the escape room, you have to correctly bread the chicken, and literally take the drumstick, put it in the colonel's mouth in the door, and turn it. And that's actually how you get out of the room. And all the while, there's kind of this disembodied colonel voice. And there's a portrait of him on the wall with laser beam eyes that actually burn some stuff. And it's really, it was actually done by an ad agency, Wieden & Kennedy. And my guess is it's more, and like a lot of the stuff that they do, it's more of a marketing stunt than an actual training thing. But in their copy, they really do say that they've actually taken training from 25 minutes down to less than 10 minutes. So no idea whether they're actually using it. I really do want to just kind of reach out to the local KFC franchise here and find out if anyone has one of those or if anyone's actually used it. Anyway, but Walmart, in fact, is really all in. And they actually are doing a really interesting training setup with, they have, I think, something on the order of 100 different regional training centers right now. And they've set up VR stations in all of them to train their employees. I'm going to show you a video on it in a second. I got to talk to the guys that worked on it a few months back. And they're saying that they're actually going to roll it out to all of the Walmart stores. Like right now at a Walmart store, they probably have a TV and a DVD player where people watch videos and whatnot, and maybe they have some written or potentially online tests. This is just a whole nother level, and got a short video to show on that as well.
When I first heard that Walmart would be using VR training in the academies, I thought it was awesome. It was really impressive, just at the level of investment that they were willing to put in the actual training piece of our associates.
You see everything that the customer sees. It makes you just actually feel like you're in the situation at that time, so you get that personal one-on-one training.
We would teach them how to cull and what to look for in the wet wall and how to crisp produce. We used it on the front end. How do we capture shrink? How do we serve customers?
For the Black Friday event, for example, we know what to look at, what other stores are seeing, how they're interacting with the customers.
As technology advances, we advance the way we train our people. And that investment, I think you'll always see a return on.
For me, it's a super powerful indicator that a company like Walmart is actually putting as much as they are into this space. So I love seeing this, and I think we're going to see a whole lot more of it. So then the last kind of case study I want to talk through is how it's being used in logistics and transportation. VW has actually been doing a lot of interesting stuff to kind of train people on how to actually work on their cars. And it's interesting, this has been done in both augmented reality and virtual reality. And are you guys familiar with the differences between augmented and virtual? Okay, so virtual reality, you are in a completely different digital world, right? Augmented reality is you're looking at the real world with digital items superimposed over top of it. And one thing that everyone's familiar with that we like to use as an example is the first down line in a football game. If you've ever seen that kind of yellow line, it's not really there, it's superimposed over the real world. That is a type of augmented reality. Or, everybody saw Pikachu in Pokemon Go, out there in the, looked like it's a real space, or even filter on Snapchat or something. Those are all examples of augmented reality. So it's been used in the BMW, I think, did some augmented reality maintenance work on an engine. And then VW's been doing more stuff actually in the VR kind of headset as well. UPS is actually using it to train drivers, which is also, you know, a great use for it. And here's an example of kind of what they're doing right now. I want to try that.
Left clear, right clear, left clear. Left hazard.
So again, another blue chip brand actually using virtual reality to train people in everyday type jobs. So it's stuff like that that gets me super excited again about this space. That's kind of the end of my formal piece of this. I was just going to open up the room now to any questions you guys might have regarding what's happening in the space or anything else you're interested in. VR in general too. Yes.
So especially with something like a BP example, is training on that level new enough so that there is not much data yet, or is there any data in terms of successful, like if you put somebody on an oil rig in a VR situation, are they actually more comfortable and ready to jump on when the helicopter drops them off?
Yeah, I mean, I actually spent a lot of time researching that in putting this together, and it is hard to find, you know, hard numbers data on it. A lot of it's kind of anecdotal today. Some of the stuff that we're doing, we are actually working to measure how people are working in it. So we will be able to actually compare that to what was done before. But right now, unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of those data points at my fingertips.
So does your company, are you guys focus on training specifically with VR, or are you helping brands with other types of VR use cases?
So we're focused on business related VR. Essentially, we want to do VR projects. We say that to kind of differentiate ourselves from companies that are gaming companies. And it's not as big of an issue today as it was a couple of years ago when we got started, where people just automatically, when they heard VR, they kind of thought gaming. So we want to provide an ROI for our customers. And the form that that's taken, the largest piece of our business is actually doing brand activations, you know, in-person events, conferences, trade shows, things like that, where we help usually corporate marketing departments. We'll either work directly with corporate marketing departments or we'll partner with, you know, large agencies or production houses to develop solutions that actually brands can deliver. That, you know, typically there's kind of two things that they want, right? They're trying to create a buzz and get people interested in their message, and VR is great to do that at kind of a base level. The level above that, and the reason why we would typically do a project with somebody, is that when you can get somebody to actually watch your VR experience and put the headset on, they will in fact hear your message. And oftentimes we'll compare and contrast that to something like a 2D video, right? Where if this is kind of playing in the background of an event or whatnot, you've seen that a million times. It's not going to be as compelling to you, or you may not, if there's 3 specific value propositions or features, benefits in there, you may or may not actually glean those by it just kind of running on a loop. Whereas if you put the headset on and, you know, they want to tell you A, B, and C, when you take it off and you talk to somebody there, typically you're much more receptive, or you're much more educated on A, B, and C because the experience, it's so much more immersive that you actually hear the message.
What's an example of that? Like a VR
So a fun one we did earlier this year, and I actually have got we can show that back here too, is so we did some work with John Deere. And this one's good because it's an example of how there's a different kind of distribution channel for different VR experiences. So we started out, we created an experience based on 2 of their large pieces of equipment and also their sales and support, trying to put a face kind of on sales and support, right? So for the pieces of equipment, hey, here's a way you can show off 200,000-pound pieces of equipment, in a 1-pound headset. And they originally took that to Con Expo, which is one of the biggest trade shows in Vegas earlier this year. Got a great response from that, and brought people in. They heard their message, and that was great. Then they use that same content for their sales folks that go out in the field, and they're showing off these pieces of equipment. And back to the trade show, they didn't have to bring those 2 pieces of equipment. So there's an immediate ROI on that. They don't need the space on their show floor for those 2 pieces of equipment, so they also don't have to pay for that. Their sales guys, after the show, can take that same experience in their briefcase with them. So it's like they're carrying 200,000 pounds of equipment in their briefcase. And when they're out meeting with a prospect, they can actually show. One of the experiences, kind of, this is what it's like in a quarry when you're actually on the piece of equipment. Another one is a time lapse over 2 months that we did in their manufacturing facility, which is really cool. You can see how this huge piece of equipment gets put together. And that's something that's super hard for them to actually show off. So it was a tool, so it's a sales tool for them as well. And then finally, we output a kind of less interactive version of it for 360 video, so they could share it socially on YouTube and Facebook. And that's a pretty good example of the types of projects that we also recently helped US Bank launch a new rewards card. They did some in-person events, influencer events, then they put the video on their website, and used it at other kind of sales opportunities and whatnot as well. So that type of thing. Yes, ma'am.
Do you feel that you're having to work a lot to, is it just more expensive to make these things, and you have, or not, say more than a training video, or investing in equipment and all the headsets, does that cost balance out, and are you having to sell yourself more, right? Are you having to sell VR, or is it an easy sell? Can you tell a little bit about that?
Well, okay, so high level VR, before talking about specifically training VR, there's a lot of interest in VR right now. So compared to other, I've sold software for years, and compared to other experiences, it's super easy to get a meeting right now because people want to try it. They want to see what's, or maybe their boss said, what's our VR strategy? And they said, oh my gosh, I don't know, what is our VR strategy? The challenge with that is that there's a lot of people that are, tire kickers that are interested in, a demo, but aren't really actually ready to in fact buy. So, that's a challenge to figure out who is in fact interested. We label ourselves as a virtual reality company. So the good news with that versus just a standard agency is that when somebody's coming to me, they're basically pre-qualified that I know that they're actually interested in VR. They may not be ready to buy, but they're interested in VR. Whereas an agency, they're selling 50 different things, and VR is one of them. So, but maybe that's going to cannibalize the business that they're doing in 2D video or something else. So it's an interesting, and then more specifically to VR training, it's a pretty new space. People are just learning about it. One of the reasons why I wanted to do this event right here was to kind of evangelize for it and to continue to shine a little bit more of a light on it, so that more people realize that it is a thing out there right now. And the number one thing that we can do actually is give demos and show people, put people in the headset, because otherwise they don't really get it necessarily. Yeah.
Without discussing specific pricing, can you describe pricing strategies of by the hour, by the square foot, by the, what's the process of trying to quote on a project?
We typically do things more project-based than kind of hourly-based. I mean, we'll do consulting, just straight up consulting, but usually if we do a project like that, it's the idea that that will be rolled into a full project. So the interesting thing about VR is that you can do anything, right? But that also makes it kind of hard to bound, you know, what the scope of a project's going to be. So typically what we'll do is we will kind of offer different buckets to folks when they say that they have, that they're interested in doing something, they're not exactly sure what. It's okay, this is what we can do, you know, at the low end. And I mean, a project can be probably anywhere from, you know, 20,000 to $1 million. And so, you know, there's a huge gap there. So there's the bucket of, are you in the, you know, are you in the budget tier? Are you in the mid tier? Or are you, hey, we can do anything. Let's really go nuts on the ideation piece and figure out what's possible.
And is it, just to follow up, is it hard to capture the scope of the work up front, or do you find that you have an understanding of what the scope of the work is? You've quoted the project, now the work has begun and the scope is changing, and are you doing change orders, or are you factored in that there will be some amount of changes going on?
That's a great question, because there's a huge, it's always a challenge as to how much time and effort you put into the statement of work before starting a project, because we want to define as close as possible just how much work we're going to actually do there, so that everyone's on the same page to protect both of us, right? Our side and their side. But it's a challenge because the first phase of an actual project typically is ideation and storyboarding, and there's some level, you can't do all of it. That's a lot of time and effort. Sometimes that's as much as, you know, 25% of a project, and you can't do that before actually kicking a project off. So we just have to stay on top of it. A lot of it's relationship based too.
So if I'm hearing correctly, that's the first phase is not something you necessarily charge for, but it is a large component of the project.
No, I'm saying we do charge for the ideation and storyboarding piece, but you can think of it almost as like there's a phase 0, right? That may involve a consulting piece that's actually, you know, monetary, or it may be, it kind of just depends on them. If it's an opportunity with AT&T, then we're going to spend more time up front on that piece, just because it's a larger actual size of the project. But it's one of the best ways that we find that we can get around having it be just this amorphous, hey, it could be anything, is here's 3 examples of the work we've already done. Do you want this one, or this one? And the thing that you're going to get is, in fact, you know, we'll say it's basically going to be this middle one. Right? It's very similar to this example of whatever that we're doing. That's the easiest way we can do it. And that's another reason why getting somebody in the headset is actually a great way to, you know, move the discussion forward. Yeah.
So you talked about a couple examples like an oil rig or driving a John Deere around a quarry. What's required to simulate the oil rig or the quarry? Is it you have to go to the quarry and go to this dangerous place yourselves in order to virtually recreate it, or are you dealing with existing schematics or something of an oil rig and you just digitally plug it in and you don't have to go out in the middle of the Gulf?
So Scott, do you go to a quarry or not? Yeah, Scott actually went on site to shoot some of the John Deere piece out near Salt Lake City, right? Was that what that was?
Phone screen. Like I just got the phone before I went there, and it's all scratched from all the dust.
But so that one was done. That was a 360 video kind of background for and you could do the same thing for an oil rig. And yes, if that's the case, then you need to actually go on site and film there. Another way to do it, particularly if you're going to use the setup that we've got back here, which is the HTC Vive, which is a room scale type of virtual reality. A lot of that's going to be a more rendered environment. So ideally, they do have models, schematics that we can actually typically work from something and create the experience based on that, as opposed to, you know, physically going there. It just depends. The expense for doing that depends on how photorealistic somebody actually wants it. For John Deere, they want to really show you what it's like in our quarry, or their customer's quarry. But for some stuff, I mean, for the manufacturing environment we're going to put you in back here, that's a completely rendered environment. It's high resolution, but it's not photorealistic necessarily. The higher the higher your production values are for that piece of it, the heavier the experience is from a processing standpoint, right? It's harder to, you need a better computer and a better processor to actually run it. So it just kind of depends on and also have a bigger budget. So
you mentioned the importance of getting people into headsets. Is that still difficult, or is that not even still, but is that difficult or not?
It just depends. So selling locally is actually relatively easy because I can bring a headset and whatnot. We're doing a project with FedEx right now, and we closed that based on the fact that we shipped them a headset to show them the example of what it was that we were going to do. And that was, here's an overnight slip to put it back when you're done, no big deal, right? So it's we have
UPS.
Yeah, we sent it FedEx.
Good.
But that was worth it to. There's not a huge cost to that. It's more of whatever the content is that we want to show them. We want to make sure that our partner, like that specifically, we showed them one that we did for AT&T, and so we get permission from them to say, hey, we want to share this with these folks over here. Is that okay? And that's actually the $25 it costs to ship it to them is, and we actually have a bunch of headsets, so it's not a big deal to ship them around. Yeah. The room scale stuff is definitely harder because if you look, there's two tripods that are holding these lighthouses that track where you are, and it requires a high-powered computer and all that good stuff. So it's a little higher level. Yes, sir.
Where are these engineering renderings come from?
Oh, well, a lot of manufacturing folks, will have CAD models for things. There's also a system called Revit that's pretty popular for kind of building schematics and whatnot. And some of it, we may just come out with a 360-degree camera, take a picture of it, and then go back and recreate that digitally. If they absolutely positively need this space, then that's probably the best way to do it.
And you're always 3D stereo.
A lot of times for a room like this, probably what we would do, we would create the outside as a kind of monoscopic background, and then we would put the chairs and the things in scene would be objects that would be those would be three-dimensional. And you may be, the experience that you'll see back here, the pump is a three-dimensional thing. You can walk around it and whatnot. The walls on the background of the kind of garage type environment that you're in, that's monoscopic. You'll just, when you try it out, you'll see what I'm talking about. And speaking of that, shall we do some demos? All right, woo! Cheers. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, everybody. Anybody want to yell first?
He was back there already.
Oh, wow, man. Yeah, and
this is like a construction line. So you twist this to loosen the thing. So it's not
actually, I gave you one.
All right, put these over your ears. Very good. Do you hear the shop noise? Turn around to your right.
To my right.
That works too. Here are your hands. Are they in the right hand? Is your right hand your right hand or your left? Yeah, there you go. Good. Okay, I'm gonna start you off. Look up or see some instructions. To your right. Look to your right. There you go. Again, it's easier in VR. You don't actually have to. You just hammer bolts, don't screw them. You don't have to put the wrench away. You just throw it somewhere.
Oh, okay. Joe was. Okay. For a second, one minute first.
Yeah, actually, if you want to, after you do that stuff, if you want to grab some more balls, I'll let him finish the procedure. So we've got a selfie camera on here. So you can, if you hit the button on your thumb, you can take a picture if you want. Very good. Okay, now you didn't find any of the Easter eggs, so I'll just tell you. If you grab one of the balls in that yellow container to your left, keep looking, left, more left. Keep looking left. See those balls right there? Grab one of those. And now throw that at the red barrel that's to the right of that sign. Go back left, right, up, up. Oh, really? All right, you found it. That's step one. Almost. You don't have to throw it very high. Oh, very nice. Very nice. All right, I'll take your hands. You can pull the headset off.
Was this your first time doing that? Yep. What'd you think?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah?
So if you type your email in right here, we'll send you that picture we took.
Thank you.
I'm good, how are you? Yeah.
It's like an instruction. Tighten it. So we'll put that on first.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of, we just pivoted. I have live instructions, but I do a lot of.
Okay.
I think we'll stop. Getting all the AR.
That's super convenient.
Yeah, so,